Today, we are mainly going to just talk about what it was going to be, and we're going to try to do a little bit of a discussion of Mary Meeker's prediction for the internet, which came out about a month ago. And the other thing I want to do is, yesterday I was in a meeting of ASEC. ASEC is Assurance Services Executive Committee of the AICPA. The AICPA, I assume you know that. ASEC, Assurance Services Executive Committee. And that's one of the senior executive committees of the AICPA. And they wouldn't say it in these terms, but what they really are aiming at is develop new services for the accountant. So when you are out there in your profession, ASEC is developing things that you can provide your service as an accountant. So that's the purpose, Assurance Services and that committee. And yesterday we had a whole discussion about new technology and the ICPA and the accountant. And they had the slides that Amy Paulicki, the staff, the vice president of the ICPA that participates on this, had prepared, and she wanted to discuss it with the committee. And if I have a chance, I'm going to discuss them with you today. If not, it will be the next time, but we will discuss them. Okay, and so that's kind of an addition to what we're planning to do. Obviously, we are going to work on web time, and so we might be changing the curriculum a little bit. And then we're going to talk probably starting next week about predicting technologies. And I will spend some time talking about the real-time economy, the now economy, the economy that rises tremendously rapidly. And you're going to notice, and you haven't had a lot of accounting yet, but you're going to notice that what I say about accounting and auditing is a little bit different than what other professors say. And because my frame has always been this kind of futuristic frame of accounting. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in a little while, just give me some time. Then we are going to talk about electronization, and some people use the word digitalization. And there are a couple of books about the digitalization of processes. I like to use the word electronization. I'll explain you later what it is. And then we are going to go to these areas of continuous monitoring, continuous audit, and continuous audit. And we usually call this thing digital accounting. And under these we have continuous monitoring, continuous audit. We have this continuous risk monitoring and assessment, and we even talk about continuous, let's leave this one. And basically this idea is some degree of automation or substantial degree of automation in business measurement and assurance functions. I tend to use this word assurance instead of the word audit. And we typically call assurance an umbrella of services. One of it is the traditional audit. But there might be many other ones like SysTrust, WebTrust, et cetera, that covers this idea of assurance. Can you just spend 1 second and tell me what you think assurance is?
Is it just making sure that everything is being done in following the correct procedures, the correct work process?
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit too specific. It's a verification thing. Yes, you are in the ballpark here. And I usually say accounting is measurement, and auditing is assurance. Assurance is a method of verification. Now, just starting from the beginning, a little bit of controversy here. Measurement of business, accounting, and what you're going to learn in introductory, intermediate, advanced are pretty much anachronistic methods, passé methods of measurement. It says degrees of aggregation that were developed for the Pony Express generation. Okay, the way we developed accounting over since let's say immemorial days were always contingent on technology. You couldn't measure things and write them down if you didn't know how to write. But once you started writing, you could record. Once you started having computers, you can record differently. Once you're having real-time computers, you can record differently. But unfortunately, because of the way legislation works and etc., the measurement methods remain reasonably passé. And we are going to talk a little bit about that. And the second thing around it is this idea of assurance, auditing. And this idea of assurance is verifying what you measure is correct. Very much what Abigail said is a verification methodology. And if you think about audit, you're going to think about audit as the general that comes in after the battle and shoots the wound, correct? Why do we say that? Yeah.
Because it's verification, like the job is done. That's why the general comes in.
That's one part of the story, is verification, the job is done, but why do you have to look backwards? Could you predict how the job will be done, and if it was done wrong, you catch it?
Yes, good.
We can learn and in the next year we can do better.
Yeah. Good. You guys are thinking in the right direction. I typically have to do this little chart, the retroactive audit, the audit looking to the past, and the predictive audit. Predictive audit. And around here in the predictive audit, I break it down in just predictive and the thing I call preventive. Predictive, preventive. Okay, and what does that mean? This is the traditional audit. You look at what has happened and verify if it was reasonably performed. A predictive audit is an audit whereby you create models to predict what's going to happen in the world, and you compare what you think was going to happen in the world with what actually gets to happen. And if it's different, then you have what we call an alert or an alarm. Now, in systems, in computer systems, they typically are sequential, and there are upstream systems, and there are downstream systems. And your data goes from one to your current system to the downstream system. If you detect that something is wrong here, you could literally block it to go downstream. That's called preventive. Now, I'll give you an example. Might sound a little bit conceptual. Example, we did a project with MetLife. MetLife's large insurance company. And where we got the data was in their aggregated system for making payments. So once someone had an insurance and there was a casualty in the insurance and the payment was due, they had a wire transfer system that they wired the money to bank account. Now, a traditional audit would do what? Would look at those payments made and see if those payments were accurately made. What would the preventive, in this case, a predictive preventive system would do? Would look at the proposed payment, the payment here, to be sent to the wire transfer system, and if there is a high suspicion code, it would stop it and examine it without a payment being made. So that's a preventive system. There are very few of these out there. Okay? So this idea of digital accounting incorporates continuous monitoring, continuous audit, and what we call continuous risk monitoring and assessment. We'll go to each one of these, but I try to introduce what we're going to do in the course here. Okay, now, other thing we're going to cover is something that is just starting to happen. The ASEC has issued part of the ADS. The ADS is the Audit Data Standard. This is a brand new thing. What basically, just to give you a kind of a global view of what this thing is auditors. I started teaching IT audit many, many years ago. And at that time, I taught, I got my PhD, went back to Brazil for 2 years. When I come back here, I went to USC, University of Southern California. And they gave me immediately an IT audit class to teach. And that time was pretty much kind of a modern thing. And I basically figured out in 10 years there'll be no traditional auditors, only IT auditors. Why? Because every company has computer systems. No one does processing by hand anymore, even in the 70s. Now 40 years have passed, and guess what? About 15% of the auditors are IT auditors. So something is wrong, correct? Something is strange. Well, what basically is the problem is that data is very difficult to get access to. I know you haven't taken auditing, you haven't even taken too much accounting, but you heard about it. So why is data difficult to access? In theory, an external auditor has access to anything they want. In theory, internal auditors have access to anything they want, but in reality, that's not true. So the AICPA's ASEC, and actually originally the Center for Audit Quality, which is also AICPA Big Four organization, the Center for Audit Quality started this idea of creating a standard for giving data to the auditors, so the auditors could have data for what they need to perform. And this project died with the crisis of 2008, but then the AICPA took it over. The gentleman from Ernst & Young, Bill Titterer, who might come and talk to you, actually moved over to ASEC, became the chairman of ASEC, and we started this audit data standard idea. And the audit data standard idea is an idea that every company should have a set of files along the 6 cycles, general ledger, order to cash, procure to pay, etc., that follows a certain standard of data. And so therefore it would become much easier to perform these audits because the data would be available. So in general, what the company systems are here, and this will be an extraction, and the extraction will create an audit data standard. And this will be basically 6 cycles of the data standard. To that concept, we added the concept here, and we convinced the ICPA to do that we call audit apps. And the idea of the audit apps is if you know what data you're going to get, you can create procedures. Like an app on your cell phone, you can create procedures to perform certain types of audits, audit procedures, okay? And actually, a couple of PhD students of ours, Junday, Pei Li, to mention a couple, are writing dissertations dealing with this particular case. The AICPA already published 3 of the audit data standards, and 2 of them are in exposure draft, should come out this month. Now, at that time when they conceptualized it, I already had said this, is that you have this cycle, general ledger, procure to pay, order to cash, etc., etc. There are typically 6 cycles. When Helen Brown will teach you auditing, she is going to, your textbook is going to break down auditing into these cycles. But if you do any work in auditing, you realize that a bank is very, very different from a manufacturing or from a service firm. So we actually started thinking that we needed to create standards more specialized for industry. And so the idea in the long term is that we'll have some maybe financial services, manufacturing, some breakdown. And so the standards, instead of being 6, are going to be 6 multiplied by X. So that's the kind of grand vision. At this moment, we are working on getting the 6 out. You are actually in Blackboard. How many of you do not have access to Blackboard? It's not too bad, not too bad. Make very sure I have your email. Have you been getting my emails? Okay, that's what I'm trying to do is until you guys are on Blackboard, I'm going to send everything by email that you need to get. Okay? But if you go in Blackboard in the ADS, you already have the 5 of the standards in there in the basic standard. And you know, standards are not something that you take in the bus to read. They are things that you consult. But I want you to kind of get familiarized with them because I think it'll be very useful. And by the way, no one is using them yet. So we have maybe other tactics, but this is kind of a vision more than reality. Now, the other thing we are going to cover, and not too much, is XBRL. Do you know what XBRL is? Name is Extensible Business Reporting Language. And let me just then tell you a little story just to introduce you. The idea, maybe 20 years ago, the W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, in the early years of the internet, of the web, not of the internet, created a language called XML, Extensible Markup Language. That's kind of the second generation HTML. You all know what HTML is, correct? Yes? Don't be embarrassed to say no, okay? Don't be embarrassed to say no. The technology is such that you need to learn the base in order to know the next level and the next level. It's not like certain things are counting, you don't know this, it's okay to know that. Technology, you need to kind of piggyback your knowledge. So don't be embarrassed to say no. So the World Wide Web created this thing called XML, and the idea was, people call them languages, extensible markup language. That is a little bit less of a language, it's more of a communication standard. The idea is that you have one computer here, another computer here. You want this to understand what this is doing. So basically you create a common jargon, a common protocol that they can understand each other. And so the idea of XML was for the different industries to create a data standard. And there are over 300 of these things out, and ours is called XBRL, Extensible Business Reporting Language. And the purpose of this thing is that if you publish a financial statement, you'll be able to transfer this financial statement to other computers and not have to explain every line what it is. It follows this common standard. And that's the purpose. And actually, XBRL, which we are going to discuss with the technology, etc., is really, this is your, let's say, your balance sheet, and it picks up the elements of your balance sheet and puts it in some computer format with a piece of data in the middle and tags explaining that. And now it's a requirement of the SEC that every company of certain size that is publicly traded publishes their statements in addition to in paper and in PDF on the internet, also XBRL. And so we are going to talk about XBRL. You're going to see that I have a pile of criticisms of the way they implemented XBRL, but That's our current rule, SEC rule of report. Then we are going to go to a little bit more general type of technological discussion. We're going to talk about robots and drones. Can you just tell me in 1 second what you think is the effect of this kind of technology on your brains?
I think we're just getting dependent on technology and we can't live without it. We almost have like
Yeah, there are psychiatrists that treat computer addiction. Okay?
Much shorter attention span.
Attention spans, that's it. It's addiction and attention span and dependency.
And it affects our social interaction because everyone has their head down in a group. everyone-
Changes. Have you ever you go to a nice restaurant with a friend and there is this very good looking couple next to you on a date and each one is in their cell phone, not even talking to each other. Have you ever noticed this? Yeah. My kids who are grown up, if they say I'll take them to a nice sushi dinner or whatever, but cell phone stays in the pocket. I don't go to the extreme, no cell phones at all. I say cell phone stay in the pocket. So the moment they go to the bathroom, sit in the bathroom and play with their cell phone. And I guarantee you, most of you have done that too. Okay? Okay. Then we are going to talk about something quite interesting that, we have been talking for a long time, but you never heard of it. But now you are hearing this idea of the singularity. And the singularity is a term developed to express the day whereby computers are smarter than people. And what will be the effect of that? And that's kind of a shortcut on what the singularity means. But you think this is ever going to happen? Then that machine intelligence is going to be superior to human intelligence? What do you think?
I think it could be possible, but right now, with the way that we have machine intelligence and whatnot, it's based off of the human intelligence. So your computer really, in some respects, is only as smart as you can use it.
Okay. Any other opinions? Yeah. You think computers are going to be smarter than people?
I don't think that is possible because no matter how well it's programmed, it's still just a program. It's still just a machine. So it doesn't have that, I don't think it can have that analytical ability of a human brain because a human brain can adapt to situations, whereas an automated thing is limited to however it's been programmed. So it's always limited, I think.
Okay, what else?
I think in some ways computers are already smarter than us.
Okay, Harry, that's what I was going to say. Good. Why?
My example is kind of silly, but I was watching Jeopardy. I like Jeopardy a lot, and IBM made Watson. And they put this thing up against the best Jeopardy players of all time.
Watson defeated, they used to call it Big Blue, they defeated the world champion of chess about 5 years ago in chess. Go ahead.
I think it's possible when the computer learns how to evolve itself. Yes.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Can you add in your head 100-digit, 200-digit numbers? Can you multiply a 10-digit number by a 10-digit number in your head? Can you remember a list of 1 million numbers? Can you remember telephone numbers?
Yeah.
How many? How many, Jen? Difficult to say, of course, but 20? 3?
20 maybe.
I used to remember hundreds. I don't remember any anymore. I remember my cell phone and that's about it. Why? Because it's sitting there, I can use it. So, two questions that I addressed. Retrieval of large tables, speed and exactitude of numerical processing. They are better than us, correct? Any other examples that you would come up that computers are better than us?
They're teaching computers to read and interpret brain signals now, so
why couldn't they eventually just run on their own as they have great signals?
Possible, possible.
I saw a movie that called Imitation Games. That
Oh,
is
that's
about-
the Turing movie.
Yeah, Turing.
Alan Turing.
So, because the secret, the messages change every day, and they have time limit to block the ideals to find the words, what is the keywords. But it is totally impossible to do that. So I think it is possible that computer can do better than human brains in some cases.
Potentially in certain things. Okay, okay. I think that's where most people that study the field are today, is there are areas that computers are already better, there are areas computers are worse, and we think that there are areas that computers will be better soon. And the question is, will they be better in everything all the time? We don't know. I think that's it is. Now the Turing movie is actually an imitation game. Actually, there was a play called Turing the Enigma, and it's basically about this guy, Alan Turing. It's worthwhile watching it. It's actually something that Hollywood produced that is actually quite good. And it's about this guy. He was a British scientist, mathematician, I think from Cambridge, maybe Oxford, Cambridge maybe. And he basically went to help the war effort in England. And he single-handedly, with a couple of helpers, broke the German code. And probably people attribute the ability to win the war, at least partially win the war, to his efforts. Very interesting movie. And there is a very classic test called the Turing test. And it's an artificial intelligence test. And basically you put a person and a machine behind a door. Okay? Ask a question. If you can't distinguish what is the computer answer and the machine answer, that's an intelligent machine. Simple, correct? Mm-hmm. And that's called the Turing test. It's an interesting thing. But basically the question here is a question of, are machines going to replace humans, or what are the discussions to be had in here? You know, I always ask this question to class, I'm sure I'm going to ask it again, is, would you rather an airplane be landed by a pilot or by the automatic pilot? By a pilot.
Yeah.
Interesting. You say a pilot too? Yes. Everyone here says a pilot. How about if I tell you the following information? Your best response time is 1/10 of a second. Okay? The best response time of a machine is 1/1,000,000th of a second. Does that help a little bit to start thinking about the problem a bit differently?
Then autopilot will be
A little bit louder.
Then autopilot will be better.
Yes. Well, you see, my question is a bad question. Okay? Is a pilot better than an autopilot or vice versa? It's a bad question. A better question would be in what situations autopilot is better than a pilot. You know, in most of the times you don't fly with pilots anymore. It's autopilots flying the plane 80% of the time, 90% of the time. Typically pilots take over in takeoff and landing. Okay? And basically because that's kind of the routine, and pilots need hours to be counted in the certification and et cetera, et cetera. Now you heard about the Google car, correct? The Google car drove around San Francisco for 250,000 hours. It's an automated driving car. And they had only one accident. And the accident was that they stopped in the light, someone came and hit them from the back. But there was a guy sitting next to it. Why? Because the law in San Francisco is that you need to have a driver in the car. But he wasn't driving. So I think he was breaking the law because he wasn't driving. So you call him a driver, he should be driving, correct? By the way, the rumor, I think very strong rumor, is that both Apple and Google are trying to create a car. After the watch will be a car. Mm-hmm. Now, is this credible or not credible? Yes, no, maybe. it's very credible, meaning Google already has a car, correct? They have a car. They picked up someone else's car, put a little hop in it to improve the sensors, and they run it. Okay? What's the big difficulty for an automated car? Is it technology?
I guess the legal environment in each state.
Good, Joshua. Perfect. That's what I was going to say. Is the legal environment. Is like accounting. The legal environment is designed for the past. It's not designed for the present or for the future. And so many places, this is the problems about Airbnb. What is Airbnb?
It's when people sublet their apartments or they sublet places to people for short-term rental.
And laws are designed for traditional hotels, not for partial landing. Can you think of other things that have the same problem of
Uber,
And why is Uber has a problem with that?
because it's basically a taxi service, but it's with regular people.
What's the difference between Uber and a taxi service? Good.
A taxi service requires licensing, and Uber could be any type of driver.
Yeah, but there's also technological difference. With Uber, you know where your taxi is, and you can follow your taxi that you're going to get, and has automatic payment onto it, has some additional attributes. Now, imagine if you are a taxi owner in New York City. You paid $1 million for a medallion, a useless piece of thing. Was useful 100 years ago when they designed this idea to protect people against predatory taxi drivers. They created a license that registered the person and put a picture there and etc. So if someone did something nasty to you, like drove you around back and forth before they landed you, they could identify the person. That's why the medallions have become a monopoly. The drivers don't have the medallions anymore. Who has it is these corporations. They are worth $1 million, and they cost something cost more than the driver in the taxi sector. The cheapest thing is the car. The driver and the medallion will cost per day about the same, maybe the medallion more expensive. What's the advantage? Nothing. Now Uber comes in, is breaking that whole thing down. And so that's the problem. Uber, Airbnb, the laws are designed for the past, not for the future. Same thing here. In this discussion, we are having a lot of these automatic cars, etc., are going to require legislation change. Some countries actually are quite good at changing legislation with technology. Singapore, South Korea are the two, and some of the, like Sweden, Norway, those countries are good at adapting technology, not us. So you prefer the pilot, correct? And the driver, cab driver, even if he's talking on the phone. Even if he's eating while he's talking on the phone. No, don't laugh. This is normal. I live in New York City. Okay. Do you prefer a surgeon or a robot? Abigail is having a dilemma here to decide.
A surgeon still, I feel.
How
They're
about if I
applying
tell you
common
that the surgeon hand shakes and the robot hand shakes much less? How about if I tell you that the robot sees much better than the surgeon?
I still would pick the surgeon.
Can the robot detect, like, if you go in for surgery, if there's something wrong with, like, another part of your body they weren't expecting?
Depends. Depends on what. If it happened before and had been programmed in.
I want my surgeon operating a robot.
A surgeon operating a robot. Actually, that's the kind of a hybrid solution that they're adopting more and more. By the way, if you go and have those eye laser procedures, you think the doctor is operating you?
No.
Who is operating you? And why is that?
There's less shake and more precision with the
And
robot.
and what else? Yes, it's more precision. It's a very small field of operation, okay, and they can automate. Now, are there circumstances that thing screws up? Yes. But the question is not does this screw up or that screw up. Is what screws up less? That's the question. It's like landing the airplane. Does a person screw up more or this airplane landing software and automata? And of course, that's what you need to estimate. You know, we just had maybe a year ago, the Korean airliner slamming just before the landing in San Francisco. You remember that story? Pure pilot error. 60% of the accidents are pilot error. The question, will software make mistakes? Yes. Obviously, everything makes mistakes. Question is how much. And I think this is a question you ask about depth and development of technology. And there is a stage whereby the more sophisticated technologies pass human capabilities, and probably just immediately passing is not good enough, and to be much better to be fully adopted. But it's a very interesting question, and actually what we are going to talk in the Singularity, we are going to talk about this concept of the responsible ancestor. What does this mean? Is that you should be doing things to be very, very sure that the future technology is responsible, not only develop technology without thinking about it. And the other thing we are going to talk about is, are accountants going to be robots, or robots going to be accountants? And the answer is yes, of course. Okay, and then we are going to spend one day talking, it's 2 sessions, and that's one day, talking about the cloud, about mainframe systems, about delivering corporate systems. Why are we going to do this, delivering corporate information systems? Because you're going to be auditing these things, and you better understand what they do. We're going to talk about relational databases, we're going to talk, just giving you enough that if you do an audit, at least you know what you're doing, what you're dealing with. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what I call the audit ecosystem. And this is kind of a schematic. We talked about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence applies to auditing. We talked about some audit automation. And so we're going to talk about a system that will supply data to the auditor. The ecosystem will include things like audit data standard, apps, and a set of audit analytics. And the next kind of thing we're going to talk about is big data and audit analytics. What is big data? Everyone is talking about big data. I usually say there are 3 big receptacles of data. Video, all the video collected in the world. Second receptacle of big data is all the audio collected in the world. And the third receptacle of data, all the text, like social media and etc., collected in the world. That's 3 big sources of data, correct? Now, the next thing that we are now doing a lot of research on is what of this can be used as audit evidence. And our faculty, several of our PhD students, I was the editor, just published, coming up this month actually, in Accounting Horizon, which is a bridge journal between professors and practitioners, 6 articles on accounting and big data, and how it can be used in big data. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. You know, this is something that's very puzzling to me, but I've seen it for decades now. The Big 4 are very interested in audit analytics. Each one of them are spending millions and tens of billions of dollars in developing their own approach to audit analytics. And to the point that we actually are discussing with the Big 4 to create a consortium based at Rutgers, together with the AICPA. We had around 6 months of discussions. Next discussion is here at Rutgers on the 20th of July, to create a common pool of research to support audit analytics. So there is tremendous interest. But when you go and talk to the recruiters, many of them won't have the faintest idea what they're talking about. And that's because the top of the firms ideas don't come down to the lower part of the firms. And when you go talk to recruiters, teach them a little bit. This is a good idea. Then we're going to go to a more generic area. We're going to talk about analytics. Audit analytics is a subset of analytics. And so this is actually Davenport's work on making your company better in analytics and their competitors. And then we're going to have a little bit of fun talking about, maybe fun, maybe we'll be a little bit scared about NSA snooping and what kind of information they have. Now, I don't know if you read the newspapers yesterday, maybe not, because this program is very intensive, but yesterday the Senate and President Obama signed restrictions to the Patriot Act. And just to give you a little recap on this story, what Snowden and Manning revealed to us is that there is a huge program of data collection. And the law basically says that, that the US is allowed to collect data on anyone that is not American. But in America, there are some protections. And with the Patriot Act, that came immediately after September 11, secret courts were created, and those protections were lifted to a certain degree. But most of us, including yours truly, who work on this area, didn't realize how wide the data collection has been. In a second, I'm going to tell you a bit about my background. I worked at Bell Laboratories. And Bell Laboratories is the largest research institute in the world, and basically was a research arm of the monopoly AT&T when it was a monopoly. And then when it stopped being a monopoly, was the research arm of AT&T. From Bell Labs became AT&T Labs. And many of the data that they are collecting are data that we used to have at AT&T. Data on telephone calls. Now, what is the data that you collect? You collect the source telephone number, the addressee telephone number, the duration of the call, and sometimes the nature of the call. Not topic of the call, but is this not a voice call, but is this a data call, something like that, in order to interpret. And this data have been aggregated by the NSA. And when we are going to talk about this, we also are going to talk about police forces collecting license plate data in the EasyPass station. We are going to talk about all the telephone companies having GPS-like data. What does that mean? The moment you turn on your cell phone, you are contacting a telephone tower. And you could remotely be contacting another telephone call. So the angle between and the strength of the signal, using technology developed at Bell Labs called Jeep, can literally say exactly where you are, maybe within a range of a few feet. So the telephone companies know exactly your physical location if you're carrying your telephone. And you do carry your telephone. Okay, so the locational data is the fourth dimension of data that I usually talk about. And that data is around. And you say, oh, I don't have a GPS device. First, you have a GPS device on your cell phone. Second, they also can use Jeep. And a lot of that information has been also collected by the NSA. And what people don't realize is that there are many pieces of the puzzle. And these pieces of the puzzle put together tell a very complete story about who you are, where you are, who you are consorting with, and what you are doing. Don't look so sad. But it's pretty sad, actually. I'm a little bit sad about this. So I always say in class, forget about privacy, it's gone. Now, your major protection is the fact that you're not very interested. Okay? Now, if you bombed the Boston Marathon, you became interesting in 1 second to the other. So they can mine all the sources of data that they have and find out who did it. That costs a lot of money. And the reality is that no one was expecting it. So there are no apps designed to detect it. And so, and the other thing that is kind of happening is privacy is gone the way you traditionally think about it. But big data is growing much faster than the number of people. And so it's an ocean of data. And you are pretty small, even with all the data. You leave breadcrumbs everywhere, everything you do. Okay, and if someone invests enough money and enough time and enough concern, breaking your privacy is not particularly difficult. Google gives you a lot of free things. Why?
To get the data.
For the breadcrumbs, for the information. Meaning, have you ever thought of how revealing is of you what you search on the web? If you use Google search, it tells everything about you, correct? Maybe your most inner thoughts. Is that bad? Yes and no, depends on what angle you take. You know, there was a book, a very traditional book in the beginning days of the web called Webonomics, and it talked about selling your eyeballs. And basically you are getting that free service of Google basically to give your personal information. So you are selling your eyeballs. And so many things that you do on the web and get it for free, what you are doing is exchanging my personal information for this particular service that I receive. That's kind of the idea of selling your eyeballs, and it's good to think it in those terms. We are going to go back after we did a little bit of e-commerce in the beginning. We are going to talk a little bit more about details. We are going to talk about the issues on cyberwar. And then we are going to, the last day of classes, we are going to spend some time talking about technological startups. I'm going to have one of our PhD students come here. She is doing a startup in martial art management. And she'll talk about the problem she has and etc. And I invited a guy who has an AI startup to come and talk about it. Let's see if we go to that. This woman, Mary Meeker, she's a very famous analyst, like business analyst. And I have been kind of seeing her comments. And in the 2003-2004 dot-com catastrophe, many of the analysts got very bad reputation, but she came out pretty good. And she wasn't really dealing on her advice and et cetera, et cetera. And she prepares the state of the internet things every year. And if you look at your blackboard, you're going to see 2013, 2012, 2014, this 2015. I just picked it up about a week ago, not even that much. And there are 197 slides in here. And that's why I sent it to you in advance for you to give it a look. And they come out in really basically 3 categories. One category, what's happening with the internet. And it's mainly kind of distributive statistics on how many people are using cell phones, how many people are using internet, what do they do with it. Okay. And then she tries to make some projection of what's going to happen. And this is actually a Kleiner Perkins Kaufman bias. It's really kind of a financial analysis firm specialized in technology. And so obviously they really want to give you some insight of what to buy, what kind of stuff to buy. And then she talks about the phenomenon on the internet. So what I want to do, I'm not going to spend the next 3 classes on this. I'm going to just go over some of these things and try to discuss them with you, which I think they are most important. But you know, this is a gold mine. Anytime you're going to write a paper or that anything has with technology, you go onto this thing and pick up your data. I'm sure many of you are going to finish up using some data out of this in your class presentation. Okay? And I suggest you remember her name, Mika, so you can find it, because you know it might be 5 years you are into Ernst & Young, or now EY, and you need something about computer background and how many people have internet, you go into Mary Mika's 2020 presentation, if she's alive. Okay, so I find these things fantastic. I have been using them for a long period of time. Okay, and I'm sorry they are kind of difficult to read because I didn't cut the top off. These are PDFs. I couldn't get the PowerPoints on them. So in her outline, she talks about basically what's happening in the internet, the trends, then reimagining services, and reimagining services, reimagining taxi service with Uber, reimagining hotels with Airbnb, etc., etc. That's the kind of thing she talks. And then how it's changing, how work is changing, and then she now has this big kind of international thing, looking at China, looking at India, etc., etc., about data, and then a couple of afterthoughts that she has. And we are going to talk about them a little bit more than about the others. So basically they said, well, 2/3 of a generation are in and 2/3 of a generation out since the internet started. In this thing. Just let's understand one thing. The internet didn't start in 92. The internet started in the 70s. And one of these days I'm going to tell the story about the internet, etc. But for practical purposes, for business, the internet started in the 90s. Started basically with the efforts creating the World Wide Web. Remember I talked about the W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, but it really was one guy in laboratory in CERN that developed this idea of the World Wide Web, although there were several other services similar of them already existed, but this was the best. And this guy, or at least the one that caught on, and this guy basically had this idea. This was a whole set of computer scientists, and basically everyone contributing their ideas. And since then, since 92, 93, the web started like 91, 90, the thing has been exploding. And what we started noticing is started flattening out. Why? Because most people that could acquire the internet have acquired the internet for worldwide users. And look at this, in 95, 35 million internet users. In 2014, 2.8 billion. How many people there are in the world? 7 billion. So what happened with 4 billion? There are developing countries with no infrastructure. Internet requires a lot of infrastructure. What else?
They are old enough that they can.
Too young. Tell my granddaughter that. Too young for internet. Too old for internet. What else,
You
Catherine?
also need money to have a computer or an access.
Yes, you need money, and you need to be able to read and write.
Right.
Okay? No, you know, you can look at pictures on the internet, but you need to be able to read to get to the pictures. But I think the major kind of number restriction is really lack of infrastructure in the country and poverty. That's the two things. But you know, that's pretty good, from 35 million to 2.8 billion. Now look at this. $80 million mobile phone users in 95. 95, it's only 20 years ago. 5.2 billion mobile phone users today. By the way, this is a little bit of a bad number because many people have 2 mobile phones or 3. You go in Brazil, people carry 2 or 3 phones. 2 or 3 phones, and because one carrier is cheaper than the other for doing certain things, or one is work, one is private, etc. Big, big phenomenon about it. Now, the other thing she talks here about is internet companies by market capitalization. And Netscape was a browser company that disappeared pretty much. And Apple. In '95, their value was $5 billion and $3 billion for Apple. The value of Apple today is $763 billion. And what you see is a huge number of companies. Look at this: Apple, Google, Alibaba, Facebook, Amazon. 5 top companies, they all worth $2 billion or more, $200 billion or more. So what are these 3 phenomena? One phenomenon: tremendous distribution of the internet, tremendous distribution of cell phones. Now, look, and of course, high valuation of technology companies, and these technology companies have grown exponentially. Now, what's the effect of cell phone in relation to internet?
Provides you access to the internet wherever you are?
Yeah, it's a device. And it has to be a smartphone in general. And the real phenomenon is the fact that people, as their delivery device, are using the cell phone. And someone here, when they're talking about internet penetration, was saying, well, you need a computer, etc. You don't need a computer, you need a cell phone. You don't need a local area network, you need a cell phone. And the big phenomenon happening in this last 2 years is that the smartphone became much cheaper. And that's kind of the major effect that you can see. And it's going to be the major delivery device. So, effects. Internet user growth, solid but slowing. Why is it slowing? Because the market is saturated. And why is smartphone subscription growing but slowing? But this is a very relative thing. In 2014, 23% growth. In 2013, 27% growth. In 2012, 65% growth. So does that mean that people are not buying smartphones anymore? Why is the growth reducing?
Because people already have cell phones.
Yeah, the smartphones, the penetration not as big, but is, when you have a curve of growth, always the beginning, kind of you get bigger gains. When it's kind of a more mature market, you get a, but the real fact with smartphones is that they became cheaper. And this talks about smartphone predictions, etc., etc. So what I want you to do is, and that's why I sent it to you, is to look at this thing, because we are going to look at these growth curves and these phenomena together over the semester. And what I wanted to do today and spend some time on is talk about education, is the issue of e-education. And I just covered a couple of these things because I think we need them as a background. Recap what we talked. We talked about phenomena. You want to set it up? Remember what I said. The examples I used was brokerage, e-commerce, brokerage, travel, and banking. And what happened with these particular industries is that they totally were transformed by AE infrastructure. Now, my question to you is about e-education. What do you think is going to happen?
I think there's going to be a classroom without walls where you can learn at your own pace, your own speed, where you want, when you want, where you basically don't have to go to a physical brick and mortar structure.
You're going to have a lot more of the flipped, or the flip will evolve more where you have a lot of video lectures that students are responsible beforehand. So when you do go to class, it's already done. If you go to class, it's already done. Like that.
Okay, what else?
The company that I just left, Practicing Law Institute / the SEC Institute, what we did was we did continuing education for our legal and accounting professionals. And basically our majority of our structure was webinars, 1-hour briefings, different seminars that you just log onto your computer and watch from your office or your home.
Flexibility in hours and
Leading to a lot less personal, teacher-student relation.
The material will be more adaptable intellectually, so the material will be differentiated depending on the student, so they get the exact instruction that they need.
What was the word used?
Differentiated?
More people could be educated, easier to access.
For people who aren't like trained in teaching are actually teaching now. So like if they have knowledge about something and aren't necessarily like actual teachers are going online and making videos about the knowledge that they have.
Interesting comment, I never heard that. You're probably right. Why the
It's going to be cheaper.
I need to put green circle around this. I always talk about economics. But what else?
Skype interaction with the faculty instead of direct face-to-face interaction. Skype interaction.
Skype.
Yeah,
Skype.
it's a video Skype instead of direct face-to-face interaction.
More efficient and effective.
Efficient and effective. Yeah.
You could earn degrees through the online classes nowadays.
You know, this thing of online degrees is very equivalent to Uber, and is very equivalent to Airbnb. At this moment, a lot of people, you go for a job and they have an online degree, they say, it's not going to be like that. Correct?
Back to what Asia was saying, I think that people are also like learning differently now. So, for example, at the company that I work at, we did a lot of different simulations, and a lot of the people who would view the simulations and participate in them are saying that it's kind of gonna like revolutionize and reevaluate the way most people traditionally would learn.
Just you mentioned the flipped class, which I mentioned too. The flipped class is a little bit of learning different. But you know, I've been teaching for 40 years, and I have always done the same thing. I always make people read it in advance and then discuss it mainly in class. And then when I teach executives, I lecture. Why? Because they don't read it in advance. And you know, we have these executive programs. We used to have it in China, now we have it in Singapore. And it's Saturday, Sunday all day. Tuesday, Thursday, 3 hours a night, then Saturday, Sunday all day. And at that level of presence, it's very difficult to prepare very much in advance. And they're busy, they have jobs. But it's not good. But you guys have a very intensive learning schedule too. What else, guys?
I think that over time, if everything is online, you're going to have less need for a faculty. There's going to be a smaller faculty.
Yes, I'm losing my job. So it's not you only that are being replaced by robot accountants. Professors are being replaced by robot professors. I'm going to ask you that maybe in 5 years, do you prefer a pilot or automatic pilot? You prefer a professor or automatic professor? Don't be embarrassed. That's what it is.
I guess kind of tied to some of the stuff we've mentioned, like I think companies might invest less in training new people and expect them to figure it out online or take a seminar or something like that. There'll be less training on the job.
Let's not say less, let's just say training on the job as an issue.
I think it just becomes different.
Yeah.
Like companies, for example, invest thousands of dollars, at least with like my company, for their people to come and learn from us.
That's true. One of the slides had like an app that teaches you about, I think, human resources benefits and stuff, all doing it.
That's the Mary Meeker, correct?
Yeah.
I think also though, I mean, maybe one negative side of the way I'm seeing it is, yes, you can get all the information from e-learning. There's certain information that you learn in the actual context of a classroom that you won't get in an online class. Like, in some respects, you can say, oh, this is how you dress professionally, or this is how you dress appropriate for this class, but someone might not get the full understanding of it until they see how it's supposed to be.
So this kind of, you're designing like a contingency model here. You say, in this case, this is good, in that case, that's good, that's a contingency. And you're saying that learning method contingent on the situation, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, let me throw one here. What do you need to know in the age of Google? Now we are talking about content of learning. Let's see if I can find a place to. I don't want to raise them. There we go. So, what do you need to know in the age of Google? In the age whereby facts, the universal library, is at your fingertips.
How to type.
No, you
How
need
to
to know.
type, yeah.
You need to know like keywords. Like you need to know like specific. You need to know what to look for.
So this whole question of what the accountant should know, and this is really my addition to this, not of other people, is accounting and auditing are different things to a certain degree. and we tend to teach them together. And I think eventually we need to teach them separately. But the issue here is a very important issue. The issue is, what does a student need to know in the age of Google? In an age where a universal library of information is available at your fingertips. And it's true, the internet is a big container of information. Some of it is free, some of it is paid. And of course, every company wants to make most what they have paid. If someone is willing to pay for it, or have at least economic model to provide that information so they can make money enough to survive and to make big bucks. But it's a very important question, this question of what do you need to know in the age of Google. The other question is that you raised here is, what is the value of residential learning? What is residential learning? What you are doing. Getting to a place, listening to a professor. Compared to when I asked you how it's going to change, what Ben immediately started talking about is not a classroom. A wide area classroom without walls. Now, look at the economics of the story. Put a tenure track professor in the classroom, costs something like $50,000 a professor per course. Put a non-tenure track professor, costs maybe 20. Put an adjunct in class, costs like $6,000. How much does it cost to put a video in the class? You know, it's this is the core of our conversation. That's why on this whole semester, that's why I want to introduce it today, is there are some very basic axioms that are changing. And one of the basic axioms you will understand is the cost axiom. And instead of being the traditional managerial accounting, fixed cost for variable cost, and so you invest something on facilities, and then for every item that you create, costs you something else. Electronic education has a fixed cost, but the variable cost is infinitesimal, at least on the hands-off mode. And actually, people are going to get into this mode of thinking of the cost benefits of education, which are not there today very easily. Okay, parents very often spend what they cannot afford to educate their kids, correct? Yeah. Our kids assume those debts. And in those situations, which I would say is 90% of the world, that model will change. And you were calling attention, talking about degrees. Can you conceive people that get a bachelor's degree and never went to university?
I think that's what happens now, that there's kind of still like a negative connotation applied to an online degree.
But?
Because we have, like in America, we have such an elitist attitude towards education.
Yes. You know, there are three components. Delivery, assessment, and granting. Delivery, education being given. Assessment, you being measured on your learning. Granting is endorsing what you learn as a degree. Okay, and delivery, we have a lot of it in the public domain ourselves, 800 hours. Okay, and we are a pretty good university. Some of the things we teach, analytical auditing is unique, no one else has it. Great value for that type of thing. Now, do you think it makes a big difference if the student comes here and sits? Or he sees a tape in the internet?
I think the education is more than just the knowledge that you're getting. I guess that Katie kind of said something similar before. It's not just the information; it's the whole experience. So I think coming in, interacting with each other,
Okay,
we're
so
learning from each
residential
other.
learning has an experiential component. Absolutely.
I know for me personally, I have a very hard time focusing if I'm learning by myself, just watching a small video. It's very hard for me to keep my attention just on that video compared to being in a room where everyone else is also focused on the same thing I'm doing.
And the professor yells at you if you're texting. This is going to be, there have to be methods of providing better discipline, etc. And it's a cost-driven thing, correct? My next question would be, are all universities we have going to be here? I usually say, I talk a lot about this, and I usually say 1/3 of the universities in 10 years, colleges and universities, are not going to be here in the current form or not going to be here at all. I don't know if you follow the news, Sweetbriar, I think that just went bankrupt in Virginia. They were very affluent liberal arts college. And when the New York Times described that, said about 200 other colleges have failed in the last year. And I didn't verify that, but it seems reasonable. Now, 200 colleges is not too much, considering the number of colleges that are around. But it's already a substantive number. And I was talking 10 years from now. It seems that it's happening now. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a whole change on the cost of education. And the trade-offs are going to be, I'm bad at learning by myself, but going to the classroom might be too expensive for me. Or I cannot afford this, but I can afford something in the middle. In the middle is education. Let me show you the other stuff that we are talking about. Now, this is what we are trying to develop, how we do this. There are a pile of them around that you can find in software. We haven't found one that we really like, so we might have to develop ourselves. You know, in the internet, you don't develop anything that you don't have to. Look around, see if someone else has done it. If it's too expensive, maybe you don't, if you develop it yourself. But the basic learning manage module is not something that is particularly difficult to develop if you have the feeds to it. Now, the next thing is much more difficult. The next thing is long-term research. And what you're trying to do here is defeat the multiple choice model. And you're trying to kind of look at higher levels of cognitive learning, like reasoning, like coordinating, like inventing, and try to teach some of that. People say that's not teachable. Of course, everything is teachable to a certain degree, and you can just give experience if you can't really give a lesson. And so what we are going to do is a whole set of research studies. So no one came out with a real advanced concept of putting a USB port on your template and passing the knowledge directly. Is this totally preposterous? It's preposterous because USB is an open technology, but beside that, is the idea of mind expansion to external devices. Is that impossible?
I mean, right now it's impossible, but I think in the future, there's so many possibilities.
So you'll buy knowledge by buying a chip and impounding it?
I mean, we probably at some point in the future, we probably could. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime
It's
or
pretty
not.
scary thought, isn't it? You think it's totally impossible? It's not totally impossible. People now control screens, mouses and screens without touching them with their eyes or with their brain. Correct? So there is certainly communication from here to there, probably the other direction can happen. Yeah.
Isn't the brain an output device and it really isn't an input device?
That's a question that you would write a PhD dissertation.
What's like that?
No, but I'm serious. Meaning, no, I think the brain will have ways to be communicated to. I'm not sure what is going to be. At this moment, it's really an output device. And at this moment, the things that the brain can do without direct contact is basically brainwave control, screens and mouses and etc. But this is moving very fast, technology. Now, I don't think you should be too worried that during your young lifetime you'll be able to plug courses into your brain. I don't think that's here yet. And then, why did I say it? I just wanted you to open your mind a little bit that these things will be possible eventually, likely. But meanwhile, we need. And by the way, does society needs certification? Does society needs bachelor's, master's degrees, professional accounting, CPAs? Does society needs this? There is a role for a degree. A degree gives you a certain degree of assurance that who you are dealing with is not a hack. So degrees have a role, but maybe this idea of associate, Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, PhD is not appropriate for our times. There is a level of what you learn that needs to be assessed. I think that's totally correct. The question is this the way to assess it?
Why not? Or what would be the alternative?
That's exactly the question, right? I mean, the other alternative is you give everyone an exam. Very difficult to give in a job interview to give an exam, but you know, people do that. There is no this element of assessment, okay? And you know, the assessment thing is very tricky because it's like what I talk about the CPAs, is memorization very often. And memorization in the age of Google has its limits, or at least limited value. You know, you don't want to say memorization is not good. Okay, why? Because memorizing is a certain type of skill for your brain that you should have. Not remembering anything is not good. So memorization is good in certain things, but a lot of the half-life of knowledge is very short. And so, but you're saying, well, you're asking all these questions, you don't have answers. No, I don't have answers. But one thing I'm pretty sure that next 5 years, 10 years, educational model is going to be changing. But can I just give a little summary here for us to talk, for us to think about? My view is, no question, next 10 years, education is going to change dramatically. My second view is residential education is a luxury. And it's a luxury you pay for. And it's very expensive. It's going to continue to exist to a certain degree. The idea of extended hybrid university, whereby part of the time you're on campus, part of the time you're not on campus, is the idea that is going to come around. Because going to a campus costs money, is ecologically unsound, but gives you a social experience that you don't have, and gives you connection for the rest of your life. But there's going to be anything from 2 credits by remote education that you pay $20 to full PhDs in universities. And like I already see this in accounting, they don't say as often in ads CPA required. They say CPA or equivalent certificate required. So CIA or series of other accounting certificates are considered, they just want a certificate. Like the auditor, governance expert or whatever. And that's good and that's bad. If you have a CPA and you have monopoly and other people are competing with you, it's not good. CMA. That is good in other senses. But I don't think this stops. I don't think this online degree stop at all. And I think there's going to be much more certificates. There's going to be much more credibility to them. Many jobs are going to accept these people on the job. And what this is going to allow is a multiplicity of fields being developed that today there is no economics to it. If you are a very specialized thing, let's say accountant specialized in oil exploration, specialized in fracking, okay, very narrow kind of field. There is no universities of fracking accounting, correct? So how do you learn this? How do you learn?
On the job.
On the job training, that's the word. But there are enough fracking candidates and fracking needs that there might be enough economics to have Joshua here, some guy in China, some guy in Brazil, wanting to learn that, enough to charge some money for them and teach it, because he had on-the-job training. So this kind of diffuse knowledge needs that don't exist, that cannot be satisfied in traditional model, are going to come in big time. And you know, your company actually, I interpreted it a little bit of a diffuse knowledge need company that brings together education on a structured manner, and there are many companies that do this for special industry. That's what they're doing specialized knowledge. There is a lot of account. You know, we have this digital library, etc. Started going to ASEC meeting, the IT auditors, and the ICPA meeting. And there are little universities offering these degrees now. Because I never heard about it. Okay, now you'll see in a second why I'm doing this. Okay, so this is ASEC, which I talked before, Assurance Services Executive. And she's kind of talking about the technology and how to enhance the technology, etc. So, first question is maintaining relevance. And what she said, modernize reporting, audit, and assurance. You see, she has it different. Audit, remember, was a little part of the whole assurance function. Evolve reporting, audit, assurance by leveraging new methodology. Embrace new subject matter areas for reporting, audit, and assurance. Now let me just kind of give you a taste for it. Modernize reporting is kind of incremental thing. Second one is dealing with legal and obsolete type of rules. The third one here is maybe auditing the financial statement is too restricted. You need to audit, for example, rare minerals audits, which they are now doing. Or you need to audit ecological type of things. Okay, so maybe you need to expand the scope. So this is kind of what she's talking about here. The whole committee was there, and there was a very lively discussion. Now this is actually talking a little bit about things or the underpinnings of future accounting and assurance. This one we already started talking about here. And remember from the beginning of the lecture, XBRL, Extensible Business Reporting Language. What is it? Is your financial statement encapsulated electronically. Well, you'll learn much more about this, but this is what it is. And the third one is the audit data standard, which is the thing that I talked to you before with the little apps and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So this is the data. Now, there is a thing in the middle, XBRL, GL. We're actually developing two flavors of XBRL. One flavor is this representing just the financial statement. The other flavor is the ability to represent transactions And GL stands for general ledger. Ledger. So this is the data side of the story. This is about standards. So this is the data, this is the standards. And the first one you know about, or if you don't know, you better know very fast, US GAAP. What does GAAP stand for?
Generally accepted accounting principles.
Okay, now, GAAP, generally accepted accounting, why is it not called just accounting standards? People always forget this. Why it's not called accounting standards? Because the way this thing was adopted is one day they created the APB, Accounting Principles Board. And they wanted to regulate accounting a little bit, so they say, well, there is this principles that everyone is using, generally accepted. And we are going to narrow down some of them, tighten them up. So they created APB number 1, APB number 2, number 3, and then APB became FASB, and they created FASB number 1, FASB number 2. But there is a whole body of ways people do accounting that has not been encapsulated in the standards. And what's happening is those standards are expanding a little bit, encapsulating more and more, and forcing a rigid solution to these things. But that's what's called generally accepted. Because many things, you know, you go to oil and gas industry. Now there have been many standards to it, but there is still a lot of things that just oil and gas companies do. And so the FASB has not regulated on it. Okay. Now, all of these are ideas of expanded, ecologically, rare minerals, etc., standards that are being considered all over the world. The one that you have to worry is IFRS. IFRS is an international standard. And the idea is the GAAP is going to merge into IFRS. But the idea has been around for 10 years and they haven't merged yet, although they have joint task forces and et cetera. The idea there is going to be international standard of financial reporting. And tough order to find, tough order to fill, because you don't really think that the community of Naples, Italy, that's drawing big taxes from some particular thing in Naples is going to change the way they account for something just to satisfy the IFRS. So what's happening is that IFRS is being evolved, is being adopted in many places, and there is, what's happening is a lot of local interpretations are happening. So there is Italian flavor of IFRS. Brazil has adopted IFRS. Canada has adopted IFRS. And however, when you look carefully, there is flavors to it. But there is some kind of convergence. Venetian days, or this guy, Luca Pacioli, developed the double entry method. He really didn't invent it, he just said what the Venetian traders were doing. And this was 1492. And these methods that he developed were used to run business. Okay, they counted inventory and then they put it in there. It was a measurement of business, direct measurement of business. And they were running their business based on that. They were used for running the business. Today, you prepare a set of financial statements, obeying the FASB for the world. And then you run your business with SAP and Oracle. What does that mean? You have thousands of reports. You have millions of pieces of data. And you run your business based on that information. But what you tell the world is a very different view of that. And what's happening is that that view is getting farther and farther to what the reality of that business is. You know, you ask, Bill Gates has this famous thing that he says, the value of Microsoft is my employees. And in one sense is right, it's the human capital that they have and the IP that they have. The value of Microsoft is not the buildings that they carry and the cash and the receivables. This machine to create the cash and the receivables is what the value of Microsoft is. In the old days, you counted your inventory, counted your property, plant, and equipment, and you had a reasonable proxy for the value of your company. Very famous researchers, Ball and Brown, wrote papers in the 60s that basically ran a regression. You couldn't escape a class of mine without the equation, correct? Which said the value, market value of the firm is a function of earnings per share or earnings. Okay? And they used to get explanatory factor of 40 to 60%. We call that R squared. Today you run regressions with a lot of accounting explanatory factors, and you get between 4 and 6% explanation. Which basically tells you that these variables are not very good proxies for what the world thinks that the market value of a company is. But we still report this. And you know, with modern technology, with these things, you could report, create a financial report that you can drill down to every transaction that the company did. And of course, the companies would have a grand mal fit about this. Why? Because it reveals secrets. Yes or no? Yeah. Who your clients are? How much you sold? In theory, you tell how much you sold, but in practice, you don't. Why? Because you have 5 subsidiaries. One is a bank. The other one are transaction-based companies. You consolidate them, and there is no way to figure out what this company is really doing. So that technology, that's kind of what, maybe he didn't think that way, Joshua, but this is what actually Joshua was talking. Obsolete rules based on history that obstruct what you can do today. You can create a balance sheet today that drills down directly to the transactions. Maybe you don't reveal the transaction, but you bring them up on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis. It's really very interesting to find out how much Apple sold yesterday. And of what they sell, how many iPads they sold, and etc. And in what country. But that's kind of the problem with the standards today. Okay, and now there is a whole set of audit type of standards, and she separated. There's a financial reporting standard, there's audit type of standard, and this is the area that we have been working together, this idea of monitoring and analytics, and they haven't done too much on this area. Okay, but this is kind of her view of the key underpinnings for future accounting and assurance. I think in general the best. Now the other thing that she talks here is a need to evolve traditional reporting and assurance with the needs of users. And here she talks about past, present, and future, and separates regulatory and mandatory audit and other things that are voluntary. And this is the idea of, you know, maybe you have to create a whole set of new reports here. And I don't know exactly what she has in mind, but these are the more interesting type of things. This is actually the metamorphosis of the thing we use in EDR 2004. Okay, and basically assurance, as opposed to be trust-oriented, future-oriented, instead of being paper-based, electronic-based, instead of being manual, automated, instead of backward-looking, proactive. Remember, we just started talking about that. Customized, accessible, transparent, comprehensive, big words, correct? Big words. I only have 4 more minutes, so I'm going to show you one graph she has here, 2 graphs that she has here that I think are interesting things. This one here talks about the evolution of things that can be done. Like the technologies, paper, data digitate, this is different systems and networks, communication about where we are now. Exchange models like XBRL, etc. Technology interoperability, cloud-based computing, data analytics automated. And we actually, in this class, this is what we're going to be dealing with. Okay, we are going to do this audit ecosystem, which I have repeated that. This kind of shows a totally automated audit system. And then we're going to talk about how you facilitate it with technology, and some of them will be cloud technology. Just want to show you another slide, which she picked up. And what she did here is, remember this was the same strip that we had before. Paper, data digitization, this is network and beacon communication. She was talking about benefits and then how to apply in healthcare. Benefits, active decision making, faster information access, and goes films, digital imaging, patient data anywhere, decision making, multidisciplinary care, better decision making, interoperable systems, more informed decision making, patient-centered, automated surgery, etc., etc., and pre-disease treatment. Now, information structures need to be able to support this type of things. And we are moving in that direction. I know this was a long lecture.